Hello, my name is Peter Schotter. I've been asked to share with you some of my experiences growing lilies. Lilies for me are a wonderful part of the woodland garden, but they are only a part of it. I'm not a specialist lily grower. They have to do well in the garden and more recently in raised beds, where I've been able to increase the range of species I grow. A word about the garden. It's just under an acre. We're in the middle of Kent, on top of the North Downs, at about an elevation of 600 feet. It's a cold garden, so that's actually quite good for the early spring flowering shrubs like magnolias and rhododendrons. They tend to bloom later and avoid the frost, though this year and last have been an exception. The soil is essentially a clay, friable soil, pretty fertile, good in terms of moisture retention in summer, but one where I always incorporate grit into the planting holes for lilies in case of too much winter wet. The reality is that the drainage here is pretty good. We're on chalk, but it's well down, about 10 metres. So we have the best of both worlds, and the pH is neutral to slightly acid. So that enables me to grow quite a range of plants here and quite a range of lilies. But as I said, lilies have to do in the garden in a way that is perhaps not the best thing to ask of them. I can't be too careful about any particular species. So like everyone, I have those that I'd love to grow and can't grow so well. And I'll share a little bit of that experience with you during the course of the year. In terms of feeding and watering, etc., I don't tend to water a lot, partly because the soil retains its moisture quite well, but also because they have to just do as do most other things in the garden. I don't tend to feed. I spray prophylactically against lily beetle at most twice a year, and that's the only activity I undertake. And for the larger clumps, I will do mulching of good quality garden compost, typically in the autumn. So with that, let's go and have a look at the lilies in the garden. So we'll stick to the back of the garden, which is where most of the lilies are. We have really island beds and border beds, some herbaceous, which my wife looks after in the main. Then panning round the beginning of the woodland area, another mainly herbaceous bed with a few lilies in. My greenhouse where I used to grow tropical orchids and now have lots of lily seeds coming up. And this bed by the garage where essentially the most important activity at the moment is seeing my clump of Lilium hansoni come up. Let's go to the back of the garden and then we'll look at a typical bed and the two raised beds. This is the first raised bed I made, now nearly 5 years old, very much to grow these unusual woodlanders, epigeas here, repens, and over there Galtherioides, woodland corridalis, like fumarifolia here, with the blue flowers, and shortias. There's a shortia in flower here. Things that typically wouldn't be favourites to flower in our dry southeastern climate, but in the composted bark they really seem to get on well. And in here I've got some various orchids, some cypripediums that come from China and do well, Lichangensi and Macranthus album. I've got Meconopsis delavii enjoying things here and blooming for the first time last year. And I've got various lilies, not yet showing very much. They're just coming up over there in front of the epigea. That's a little group of parii. I have one seed raised grey eye that I thought was going to flower last year, but didn't. Hopefully it will this year. And I also have various Maclinii in here. This is the second of my two raised beds. Encouraged by the success of a number of the woodland plants in the first bed and by lilies such as Rubellum and Fargesii, I decided that there was an opportunity to grow even more things that I like. So here again we've got a mix of dwarf rhododendrons, various dwarf ericaceous plants, various bulb genera, like erythronium and also some trilliums, plus of course lilies. So as we go along there, various dwarf rhododendron species. Here we've got some auratum coming up. This is the just emerging shoots of my best form of Lilium parrii, which I grew from seed of the mother plant, which I got from Hyde lilies in the northwest. Here are some Lilium Bollanderi just appearing above soil from Matthias Knoll, doing well. Lilium chalcedonicum, a bit of a surprise in a very acidic bed, but these came from Paul Christian, from his original collection, and in talking to him, I've never had any success with chalcedonicum. He said he thought that moisture and free drainage was key rather than pH, encouraged me to try them in this composted bark bed, and those small bulbs, they've now come up, this is the third year, and I should with luck have a flower this year, which will be very exciting. This is an unusual little erythronium called purpurascens from North America. Then these are seed raised acusianum. Auratum virginale from Mel, which are coming up. With the acusianum and the auratum, they may prove too big for this bed and I may move them, but at the moment I'm using it also as a nursery bed. And we've got more petiolarid primulas in here, got some orchids, epigeas, and all in all, very pleased with the way things have developed here. And then as we move out of the bed, just to show you quickly, under a magnolia, an emerging group of Lilium Humboldtii oscillatum. It doesn't look like a very good spot for them, not a lot of sun, yet 6 to 7 foot stems, and they seem to love it here. So I don't know why, but I'm jolly pleased again to see them. And then here's more by way of the woodland beds. And just to make one point, I think a little bit like orchids, it seems to me that lilies are very, very pernickety about where they will be happy growing. So I'll just step in here so you can see. Here is a group of Lilium wardii, and they do really, really well. It's the 5th spot in the garden I've tried them. Why they do well here with the same treatment, the same soil preparation, I have absolutely no idea. I'm just really, really happy they do well. So that gives you an idea. It's very much, they're in the woodland garden. They're there to add colour and interest at a difficult time of year when all of the traditional spring shrubs have died down, and I wouldn't be without them. They're magnificent plants. I would never claim to be an expert. I suppose I know what I like, and I'll keep trying to grow what I like, even if I'm not very successful with it. But so far so good, and more lilies seem to like it with me than not, and I'll keep trying the ones that have proven more difficult and challenging to grow as we head along. So enjoy the spring, and I'll be in touch in the summer when we have a little bit more colour to show. Goodbye. Well, this is the half-term report from the North Downs in Kent. The first few lilies are beginning to flower. Big surprise and deep joy today when this flower opened, slightly rain-battered and a little bit nibbled, but it is in fact, as I hope you will now see, Lilium henrici, which I got from Pitcairn, Susan Band, and the first ones to flower were Nemochoris pardenthina, which have subsequently never flowered for me. And then suddenly this year, this shot up with 3 stems, nice and tall, and is definitely a Henrici. So I'm chuffed to bits with that. And it seems to be a little different from the other clone I have. The smaller lilies, the white, although slightly pink flushed in this case, McLeanii from the Saramati form. And in here I have Parii, Kellogii in there somewhere. Gets all a little bit mixed up. Just at the back there, behind the McLeanii, is my RHS Lily Group seed raised Lilium Grayi, which I think will flower for the first time. Again, great excitement. McLeanii is otherwise coming up. Fargesii just starting. My rubellum coming into bud here. And just a little extra from a different family, a very sweet dwarf Paris called Luquenensis, a Chinese species with beautifully marbled foliage. Lilium kesselringianum is always one of the first lilies in the garden to flower, and literally just opening its first flowers today. And round the corner, a clump of very dark flowered martagon, Catanii or similar. And here my clump of Tsingtaoense, which again is in a fairly dry spot, but it seems to like it there and flowers well every year for me. Has not yet set seed though. So this is my clump of Schwitzianum. It blooms a little later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks maybe, than does Kesselringianum. And over here, a thrill, my first bud on Lilium arminum, which I received thanks to the kindness of Matthias Knoll in Austria. So this is my other raised bed. Highlights, buds for the first time on Pseudo-Grayi. This is the label mistake that we all have. Clearly Lilium hansoni, but it shouldn't be. That will get moved in the autumn. My Parii from my own seed, looking very strong. There should be a lot of flower on that this year. Auratums from my own seed, like Rubra vittatum, and Virginale over here from seedlings from Mel Herbert. Dashing back, I'm still in hope of a bud on the Chalcedonicum, which would be my first time. Here we have Wenshanense. One or two of the rarer Alpine Chinese. In here, in the rhododendron, is Sulii. Here I've got some Euxanthum in the little rhododendron at the front there. Stuartianum here, and more Henrici here at the back. And I hope a little Medongense in the rhododendron. And finally here, some Papilliferum. This is the benefits of having this bed, that I can grow a number of species that I had no chance with before. So that's the half-term report. There are one or two other things going on, but I don't want to bore you more for today. Bye-bye. And here's Lilium kesselringianum, now in the middle of May, reasonably well in flower, with 2 stems in flower and another 2 in bud. Another first-time bloomer for me is Lilium arminum, which I have thanks to the generosity of Matthias Knoll in Austria, the rarest of the yellow Caucasians from Armenia and Georgia, and, as I say, blooming beautifully with a single flower for the first time. So on a rather grey day, my main stand of Lilium schibitzianum, one of the 4 genetically distinct Caucasian yellow species, unlike some who say that the fragrance of, in particular, Kesselringianum is very, very pleasant, I find all of them have a similar, slightly musky, not unpleasant, but not gloriously fragrant smell. But a stand doing well, slow to clump up, but in good order this year. So this is one of the dark flowered, deep pink Macliniais, I think also called Chitrangidae now. A bit windy, I'm afraid, but gives you an idea of the colour. This is a group of typical Lilium Maclinii that's been here for a few years and making now stems of nearly 5 feet. And as you can see, a fairly typical white, quite heavily flushed pink colour. If I have a favourite lily, it might well be this one, Lilium henrici from China, with these bewitching, dangling Nemochorus-like flowers, as used to be called, and that famous dark blotch. Absolutely gorgeous. The first 2 of the 5 buds have opened in the last 2 days. The first flower on my Lilium pseudo-grayi. Really pretty. It's a short stem, first bloom. Hopefully more to come and bigger in future years. I thought I'd show you this martagon, not because it's particularly special in terms of its coloration, but because it carries around 60 or just over 60 flowers on a stem. Perhaps slightly fewer this year, but over 60 for the last 2. So my clump of the wonderful Lilium tsingtaoense in full bloom in front of it, Dactylorhiza grandis. I've extolled the virtues of Lilium pardalinum before. This is part of the redistribution from my main clump a couple of years ago. This in a very, very dry and unfavourable spot, really. Stems perhaps not quite as tall as elsewhere, about 3 feet, but flowering well. And slightly further along in the shade, from that same redistribution, a clump that's 6 to 7 feet tall, doing really well. Very, very versatile and a very, very good doer. The first of my Lilium thaliense Kai-Chen to open, stems about 7 feet tall. A marvellous, marvellous plant to grow through an under canopy of rhododendrons and similar. Always flowers well, probably easier than straight thaliense. It was introduced wrongly as Xanthellum luteum some years ago, which is a very different, beautiful alpine Chinese lily. So one to recommend. There's no perfect time to catch two flowering stems that open at different rates, but here's my best Lilium parrii with stems around 5 feet and more than 20 buds per stem, looking pretty good. This is the rather lovely Lilium pitcairnense. This is blooming for me for the second time, having carried a single bloom last year on something close to an 80 centimetre stem. And the lovely orangey shade which marks it as, of course, similar but distinct in terms of colourways from Pardalinum. So this is that same group of Lilium Humboldtii ocellatum. A very pretty lily. And this is an unidentified species, but clearly in the Bakerianum grex, perhaps also a form of Bakerianum, cream with a little bit of pink, and behind my first ever flower on Chalcedonicum. The lovely Lilium Bakerianum rubrum from China. Just a gorgeous lily that's blooming now for the third year. This is an unidentified species from Lily Group seed. The seed, I think, donated by Martin Toon and seemingly close to Stuartianum. The beautiful but rather unruly Lilium wardii. The delightful Auratum variety pictum. Not quite as vigorous as last year, but still looking pretty good. This is Lilium primulinum, one of the last to flower with me, with a rather heady, musky scent. Lilium fargesii just opening on a roughly 70 centimetre stem. It's been disappointing this year with the early spring frosts and not as good as in the last few years, but still an unusual and very pretty lily. The last of my lilies for this year is a very good form of Lilium speciosum called 4th of July. Flowers up to about 4 inches across. I have had it at 6 feet and 20 flowers, but this summer has not been the best for some of the lily species, including this one. Well, that's all from me. I hope you've enjoyed the clips of my lilies that I've sent in the last couple of months to Mel. Even with the ravages of the weather this year, with the late spring frosts, with the very hot temperatures we've had in the south, brutally hot, and the lack of rain, the lilies in the garden have by and large done pretty well. And I hope, obviously, that we don't have too many more summers like this one in the years to come, and that the lilies can enjoy more normal climate conditions and continue to flourish. At least I hope you'll have taken out of my experience that a lot of species lilies are very accommodating and very generous garden plants. In my view, no garden should be without some at least. Happy growing.